Yesterday, as luck would have it, a 32 gigabyte DDR5 kit arrived that I had ordered weeks ago after many delays getting here. You see, I plan to use it for a benchmarking system I'm putting together that will basically be a duplicate of the X3D platform I use in my main desktop. That way I can test a GPU in a nearly identical system without having to take apart my desktop to do so. And it got here later than I wanted it to, but in many ways I was like, this is actually perfect. Here is an example of something that affects me and my business, and it is linked to, well, the major controversy going on right now, that of exploding RAM prices. I thought, let's see how much this kit has gone up in price since I ordered it. And it was 52%. That's right. Since pressing buy and it getting here, it has gone up in price 52%. And yes, that is absolutely insane. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if in a month or two, the RAM module kit I'm holding right now will be worth more than the X3D platform it's going to go into. And so today I want to explain exactly what is going on with DRAM pricing and actually why it is so much worse, and it is going to keep getting so much worse than I think most people realize after consulting with about a dozen sources of mine in DRAM manufacturing, retail, and distribution behind the scenes. And most importantly for you, the viewer, I will also answer which products are going to go up in price soonest, which will go up in price the most, and which products, according to my sources, have already been canceled from coming out next year, all due to Sam Altman's DRAM hoarding scheme. But before I do get to that advice and cancellation leak section, I do want to fully explain what happened and how this has gotten so bad. And it really comes down to three main factors. And the first one is, yes, the thing everyone kind of knows about publicly, the thing that set off the chain of dominoes that rocketed up DRAM prices, the deals signed between SK Hynix and Samsung with OpenAI to secure a significant part of the world's DRAM supply for the foreseeable future. Yes, that's public. We all know that happened. However, according to literally everyone I've spoken with behind the scenes on this, and I mean literally every man, every woman I've spoken with that works in DRAM supply and manufacturing that would speak with me, the big rumor going around in those circles right now is that Samsung and SK Hynix did not know how big each other's deals were, nor necessarily how simultaneously they would be kicked off until close to right before the announcement on October 1st. Now, I want to be clear though. Yeah, obviously Samsung knew what deal they were signing. It's not like OpenAI showed up and was like, here's the deal, you have to sign now at gunpoint or something. No, they knew what their own deals were. However, they didn't realize that their competition had a similarly huge deal and that they would be announced on the same day. In fact, there's evidence of this in the public. If you go back and look at some of the reporting that was out there the morning that those deals with SK Hynix and Samsung were announced, you can see that, yes, everyone knew that Sam Altman was flying to South Korea to meet with companies, and some of those companies did include Samsung and SK Hynix. But most of the reporting was about Foxconn or TSMC, and anything mentioning SK Hynix and Samsung was just exploring ties. Nobody suggested that exploring ties meant two of the largest DRAM suppliers would simultaneously that same day announce that 40% of global supply was going to be gobbled up by a single entity. And that's because they didn't both know that they were signing the deals on the same day. At least according to everyone I've spoken with, that's what's being alleged out there. And it does make sense selfishly for why OpenAI would have done this. It's common sense that if you are going to work with two big suppliers and get two big deals, that if they don't know both of them are doing a similarly big deal, you might be able to get better pricing. Like if they knew you're basically buying everything on the market, then they know that you want everything and you can probably charge more for it. So from that perspective, this does make sense why OpenAI would have done this. But you see, this shady secrecy and the boldness of the sizes did make the next factor I'm about to bring up significantly worse because of how surprising it was. And that second factor making pricing bad is that, well, when everyone saw how big this deal was and how sudden it was announced, it made everybody that competes with OpenAI and even other companies like OEMs that just need a lot of RAM for laptops panic more than they otherwise would. Were it to have been one fairly large deal with Samsung, everyone would go, oh, we better make sure we have enough RAM, but there's still plenty out there, and people are tooling up more RAM, whatever. But when, if you're someone like a competitor to OpenAI and you wake up and it's like 40% of the world's supply of RAM is now gone, you're not going to wait any longer. You're going to go, well, we didn't know this deal was happening until the day it was announced. How did we not catch wind of this? What else do we not know? What other NDA discussions are going on with other competitors? And so everyone wanted their own little secret NDAs and discussions, and they all bought up whatever they could. And because everyone was very secretive about it, the same way OpenAI was, nobody knew who was buying up what, when, and if it even made sense how much anyone was buying up, because it was all, again, kept so secretive, and everyone was so panicked. And so then, boom, all of the supply was gone. You see, OpenAI surprised everyone with these deals that they were blown away they hadn't heard about before they were announced. That caused all of them to panic worse and buy up everything instantly. And then we get to point number 3 here, the third factor that makes this worse than it would have otherwise been. That supply that everyone snapped up instantly after hearing about the OpenAI deal, it was less supply than there would usually be. You see, normally there would be a decent amount of safety stock out there in the event some natural disaster or some world event happened that destroyed RAM supply in some region. There are warehouses that keep safety stock in the event something like this happens. But I am told that there was much less safety stock this fall than there would usually be for a few reasons. The first being all of the tariff chaos. On again tariffs, off again tariffs, randomly up and down with random countries day to day. All of this chaos meant that many companies felt like it wasn't safe to keep a ton of stock, to import a ton of RAM at once, because who knows, maybe all of the tariffs, or maybe one tariff that affects one thing affecting one part of the order you want to make, maybe that'll be gone in a month. And if you're the only company that imported everything when everything was the most expensive, you'll be at a pricing disadvantage to your competition. So there wasn't as much of a desire to make big, bold purchases by most companies. But on top of that, it also just didn't really make sense from a financial perspective. You see, if you ignore the last few months and then look at how DRAM prices were trending over the summer, they were trending down as well. And that means, why would you buy a ton of RAM up one month if you know that it's likely the next month that RAM will be even cheaper? Again, especially if you know that the tariffs could be gone or something like that. And that means people just did not stockpile as much as usual. And actually, there's even a third factor related to this subject, and that's that normally when major DRAM manufacturers like, Micron or Samsung, cycle to new machinery, they take a lot of their old machinery and sell it off, and then budget no-name RAM companies buy them up and make kind of older or slower RAM for a cheaper price or just extra capacity. They probably don't make as much margin as Samsung, but the fact that they can make this other thing when there's shortages, well, that helps the whole market. Well, a lot of these companies in South Korea have not been selling off a lot of their old machinery once they've upgraded due to, again, fears about some backlash from the current US regime. So those old machines, a lot of them that would be with other smaller companies helping alleviate supply issues, they're just sitting collecting dust in warehouses. And so that's the story. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. This is the perfect storm of unpreparedness, panic, and greed. OpenAI ambushed this market with 2 insane deals. Everyone got extra spooked because of how insane the deals were and how suddenly they were announced, and they panic bought everything. And because of the recent trade wars, everyone was less prepared for an event like this to happen in the first place. Oh, and one more thing. If you actually read more than just the headline of this deal that OpenAI has made with Samsung and also the deal with SK Hynix, you'll see that OpenAI didn't buy a bunch of DDR5 sticks, actually. They bought a bunch of raw wafers that weren't even finished yet, apparently without even knowing how or where or when they're going to finish them entirely. So that's really abnormal. And yep, that makes me think that OpenAI's deal, this highly unusual deal, to me smells like a deliberate attempt to starve the competition of RAM, which might as well be water for scaling servers, so they could keep ahead of the competition that, as of late, has been dangerously close to catching up to OpenAI. Yes, to me, it looks like, I suspect, that Sam Altman is getting increasingly desperate and looking for increasingly desperate ways to stay ahead of the competition that is very close to catching up to him. They bought up a bunch of wafers. They said, we'll use them eventually maybe, but here's what we do know. If we take these wafers, just put them in a warehouse, we know our competition can't have them, and it's f***ed us all over. OEMs, pre-built company owners, and even game devs that spoke with me this week are furious. And Sam, he's laughing to the bank. And actually, I've heard other crazy things too, I will say, that I just didn't feel comfortable doubling down on. Like, multiple people at DRAM companies told me that they heard OpenAI bought up some of the machinery too. I don't know. I hope more people out there dig into what's going on with these deals with OpenAI, because it seems clear that they are anything but typical, and there could be even more to them than I've reported on today. And there's things that I just don't feel comfortable doubling down on because they sounded, well, a little too crazy to talk about directly without more information or more proof. But I will say, what I've talked about today, I think I've just scratched the surface on what's going on here. And, yeah, it sucks. This honestly reminds me of that Nvidia's Ultimate Play report that I put out a few years ago, right before the gaming market went into a bout of utter scarcity. And honestly, I think it is about to again, at least in the short to midterm. But how much worse will it be, and which products will be affected the most? Well, I'm going to cover that now for you all. I'm actually going to do a tiered E through S tier ranking of which products are going to be most screwed over by this, and which products by AMD and Nvidia are, according to my sources, canceled already after an ad from Silver Knight PCs. That's right, this piece of content is brought to you by Silver Knight PCs, a disabled veteran-owned and operated pre-built PC and parts company headquartered in North Carolina that ships to FPOs and APOs. Now, why would you choose Silver Knight PCs? Well, let me tell you. First of all, they have some of the fairest pricing that I've ever seen, and I know they're trustworthy too because they're literally friends of the channel. In fact, you can check out an interview with the owner, Ted, on Broken Silicon 113. So I stand by them. But it's not just about, me liking them or them having fair pricing. They have great quality as well. They offer 3-year system warranties on parts and labor with paid shipping both ways in the continental United States. And they also have per component warranties in the event you change maybe a part in your system, but then another leftover part breaks. They will honor that as well. And, most of their parts are the higher quality offerings as well. Like, they don't cheap out on PSUs or cooling. They use the best stuff out there. Most of their power supplies, in fact, have 5 to 10-year warranties. Oh, and by the way, that 3-year warranty I mentioned, it's transferable without any paperwork involved. As long as someone has the order number, they can just send it to Silver Knight PCs if they're a new owner, and they'll say, yep, this PC was sold this amount of time ago with these parts. We will honor your warranty. That means you can gift this to someone, sell it in a couple years, and tell the person you're selling it to, hey, this still has a year warranty left on all of its parts. They also have a trade-in program as well if you want to upgrade sooner rather than later. Maybe send in a graphics card and get a better one back. They also do that. And finally, they are doing a phenomenal tiered pre-built promotion right now where you can decide between a $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000 build. And all of those come with the high quality components and amazing warranties I've talked about. And also, you can get 10% off them right now with offer code BROKENSILICON. But you know what? They also assured me they did plan ahead and they did stockpile DRAM months ago because they saw this coming. They are one of the companies that planned ahead a bit, but I suspect these things will still sell out very quickly with how good the deals are. So please, support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out Silver Knight PCs through the link in the description below. And if you do, make sure you use offer code BROKENSILICON to get 10% off everything on their website. All right, so I wanted to spend the rest of this video ranking which products are the most effed from S tier to E tier. What's the most screwed? But before I get to that, 2 anecdotal examples to give you an idea of how bad this could get. Because I do want to make it clear, it's not just things I've seen publicly, it's not just things that I'm hearing like could be bad. Let me give you concrete examples of how bad things could be getting. So the first example is from one of my contacts at a retailer who told me that a representative at a memory or / storage company, I'm not going to say which one, but it's someone like, G-Skill or Crucial. Apparently they reached out to their leadership to ask if they could buy back RAM from them to fill orders from their other customers. That's not how this is supposed to work. You're not supposed to have someone like G-Skill reaching out to Best Buy to buy their own RAM back to fill orders that they can no longer fill with their other customers. Yes, that is how bad this is. Here's another story. One contact of mine told me that they just reached out to their sales rep at one of these RAM companies, again, someone like a Corsair, and they were told that if they wanted more DDR5, any orders that are placed now are not guaranteed to be fulfilled until December 2026. That's right. Right now, already, some retailers, whether it's large ones or mom and pop shops, are being told that if you order a pallet of RAM to be used to build computers or just to sell them from your PC store, that they can't promise you will get them until December of next year. And so, yes, I do think this could be very bad. I won't promise you it will stay that bad for that long. A lot of it depends on if the AI bubble pops sooner. But what I can say is that the first half of next year, at a minimum, is going to be rough. And so now let's get into how rough it's going to be for which products. With my S to E tier is the order I will go in list. So, S tier. Which products are the most screwed? I mean, yeah, look, obviously RAM. We're just going to put RAM up there. It's already screwed as of today. All right, now let's move on quickly. Move on to the next tier, the A tier. Next would be SSDs. Smaller company pre-built PCs, not apparently Silver Knight PCs, at least short term, but other ones, because they don't have as much RAM stored as usual. And unfortunately, from what I'm told, Radeon graphics cards. In fact, I am told that the RX 9070 GRE 16GB, a card that was going to try to use worse yields of Navi 48 to basically give you a less efficient 9070 16GB level of performance, but for less money, yeah, that's been pulled from roadmaps a lot of my sources have access to, and multiple AIBs are now telling me that it's going to come maybe late Q1 or Q2 or never. So it's sounding like it is likely canceled, unfortunately. Now, let's move on with this, though. Why is Radeon being mentioned in the A tier of screwedness and Nvidia isn't at the same tier level? Well, it's because Radeon doesn't hoard as much RAM and then sell them as part of their BOM kits to AIBs like Nvidia does. If you want further explanation, go watch that Nvidia's Ultimate Play video that I put out years ago. It entirely explains how Nvidia does things and how that differs from AMD. But the point is that AMD doesn't have the same safety stock as Nvidia. And so, yeah, Radeon prices will be going up very soon. Those reports are true. Sorry to tell you. If you want a 9070 XT, buy it right frickin' now. Oh, and one more product to add to this tier list, the A tier. Xbox. Yep, they didn't plan ahead at all, apparently. If you still want an Xbox for some reason at their current pricing, those prices could go up soon or supply could just entirely dry up because multiple sources of mine have apparently been warned by sales reps at Microsoft that this is going to affect the Xbox Series consoles very, very soon, sooner rather than later. But PlayStation is not in the same tier. We'll get to them in a second. All right, moving on to the B tier. Now we can say Nvidia. Do expect their prices to go up eventually, but they do have supplies of their current anemic RAM capacities, so it's going to take longer to hit them. I can't promise you when. Will they dry up by December, January, February? I don't know, but it should be decently after AMD, probably. So I guess you don't have to rush out to get a 5070 right away, but considering how much they're going below MSRP, if you insist on Nvidia, I wouldn't get any 8 gigabyte card, and I'd honestly probably not get any of their 12 gigabyte cards, but you see some of their 16 gigabyte cards going decently below MSRP. Now is still probably the time to buy. But notice I said their current anemic RAM capacities. Yeah, because they have those chips already stockpiled. The capacities they would need for the 5080 Super 24 gigabyte that I leaked months ago, those sound pretty much effed. And that's why Nvidia has, and I can confirm this myself now, Nvidia, yes, I've heard Nvidia has told partners that the Super Series might launch in Q3 2026. Although I want to be clear because I think there is some misconception about this out there. Q3 2026, doesn't that sound pretty specific? Yeah, that's like, I don't know, 3 quarters after when they were planning, or maybe a full year at this point, depending on when you are talking about what they initially planned. The point is, that's about when they think more RAM might be tooled up at other companies finally. And that's just a placeholder. They're like, that's when more RAM might be on the market. That doesn't mean they're sure they're going to launch at Q3 2026. I believe it's just a placeholder. It's their best estimate for when the RAM capacities they want for the Super Series will be ready. And just as easily, it could be a little bit sooner than that, or they may never launch at all. In fact, I would say they shouldn't bother launching it Q3 because the RTX 6000 series is supposed to launch less than a year after that. So that would be very weird to me, unless that also got delayed. Who knows? Maybe I'll say that in a future video. But moving on from the B tier, which is Nvidia, to the C tier, we get to phones and laptops. Major companies like HP negotiate giant deals at a time, so they do have safety stock for their laptops for now. You'll notice smaller companies like Minis Forum are already running into issues, though. But the larger the OEM, the more likely it is that they have a stockpile they can use throughout the holiday season. However, yeah, I have heard by mid next year, prices could go up on those things as well if the situation doesn't improve. But less rush to get that than you should be to get a Radeon graphics card. All right, and now the D tier. Believe it or not, PlayStation. From what I've heard, Sony planned ahead, bought up gobs of RAM near the bottom of the pricing, and thus they should be fine for months. They have plenty of GDDR6, at least that's what I'm told. Yes, prices could go up eventually. I could see that happening next year, especially if by then the Series X is $1,000. Why not? But there is a reason Sony is cutting PlayStation 5 pricing for Black Friday. They aren't just doing this as some extreme move or because sales are bad. They can afford to do it. Apparently, they're not worried about the RAM shortage, at least in the short to mid-term. And so who knows, maybe 2026 will be the year where people go, just get a PlayStation. It's the only thing with sane pricing. We'll have to see, though. But don't feel rushed to get one this second. And then the E tier. The E tier, the things that are barely affected or not affected at all. Yeah, that's going to be RAM. That's going to be anything without RAM or a heatsink. I say without a heatsink because heatsinks companies are now under strain to make heatsinks, not just for gamers, but for AI servers. But basically, if you want to buy a CPU that doesn't come with a cooler, I think those are going to be fine. In fact, I could see those prices plummeting next year because they'll have a dearth of systems to go into. So I wouldn't rush out to buy a CPU unless you want a CPU right now. Those should be fine, almost unaffected by this. At least that's what it sounds like. And all right, there you go. That's it. Except I guess I will say this too. No, I don't know if the Steam machine is affected or how. Obviously, it will be to a certain degree, but I don't know if Valve bought up a bunch of RAM early. I'd assume they did, but I don't know for sure. If I had to guess, what's going to happen with the Steam machine is they have a stockpile for their initial launch. They'll manufacture those consoles. They'll be aggressively priced, sell out instantly, and then they won't make any more for months. That's my guess at what will happen, but I'm not sure. But I did think I should probably say that because I'm sure there's a lot of people interested in the Steam machine that will want to know. And otherwise, let me say this too, to close on. I hope this AI bubble pops sooner rather than later. And while I'm not willing to bet that it will just yet, I will say this. Nvidia just had an amazing earnings report. And yet, the following day, the entire stock market is plummeting, including Nvidia. And it reminded me of something a recent guest of mine, Ed Elson, said on Broken Silicon.
So what needs to happen for the bubble to correct is it's not that we need to see a change in the real economy, because the real economy doesn't matter right now. This is all about sentiment. There needs to be a change in sentiment. There needs to be a shock to the psychology of the market. Numbers versus narratives. Those are the two things that drive stock prices. There's your numbers, that's what is your earnings, what's your revenue, all of the stuff that you see in the report. And then there's the narrative. What are you selling as the vision for the company? What is the story of the company? What's next for the company? Who's leading the company? How are they capturing people's imagination?
Does your CEO have a turtleneck?
Exactly. Does he have the turtleneck? Is he Alex Cobb, and does he have crazy hair, and does he pop zins in the middle of interviews and spin laptops on his finger? I mean, this stuff is really, really important, and it is especially important in AI right now, because as we've just discussed, the numbers are there for Nvidia. Nvidia is selling the chips. But when you go down the value chain to the consumer, the numbers aren't there. And that's where narrative has to step in. So if the AI economy right now is largely narrative, and again, that's not to say that technology is not massively valuable. It's to say that the valuations that we're seeing of these companies are largely narrative. It's a story about the future. Then what will bring it down? It will be narrative again.
Yep. So I'm not prepared to say that is happening yet, But when I see an amazing earnings report and then see that get shrugged off by investors, to me, that looks like some of that AI pixie dust that's been propelling the market to ridiculous levels is starting to wear off. I don't know if the bubble's starting to pop, but if it was, this is what it would look like.